Is your destiny determined by the stars? Are there actual spiritual beings behind all of the stars we see in the sky, or are they just giant fireballs? That's what we're talking about on today's episode of the Things You Don't Hear in Church podcast. My name is Derry.
And my name is Ethan, and make sure you guys are subscribed to our podcast so you can get all the updates, or actually also a notification bell. Apparently that's a thing that we got to hit as well. Make sure you have all that on because we talk about the things you don't hear in church every single week. Things that are intriguing, whether theology, culture. Today we're talking about the constellations and astrology and what goes on there. So definitely go subscribe. You do not want to miss these episodes. And so, Derry, start us off. What is the earliest mention or kind of sourcing of astrology as it is today? Where did it start?
Yeah. So astrology is not a new thing. Even though you have a loose understanding of it from that one white girl unless you're the white girl that's listening to this.
Almost all the white girls
Yeah, exactly. I'm not going to talk about it.
We got data. You think we're being rude. There's data behind this.
There is data behind this. Yes, there is. So it's not just a new invention. I think with a lot of the with the rise of a lot of personality tests and I guess in Christian circles like the Enneagram or the Myers-Briggs or whatever, because astrology has been such a popular thing in modern times, and the way that people use it is so just kind of personality test driven. It seems so modern. You're like, oh, this must be such a modern invention. It must be created by somebody on the internet. And it just happened to work or something. But it's not true. I mean, partially it is true. How it's used has been co-opted and formulated to fit in more of the personality test kind of realm. So 100% there's been things that are made up about it in that realm. And we'll get into that a little later. But it originates with where most, I think, religions and things originate, which is because this is kind of the oldest documentation we have, is in Mesopotamia. And so Mesopotamia is where most of our oldest documents about religion and the world just are. It's whether it was when they first started to write stuff down, or not that we have documents from that time, of course, but it was a pretty big society, and so it was written about a lot. And so maybe it's because of the birth of people actually being educated and writing things down, or I'm not sure exactly. I'm not a historian. But we have a lot of writings from the Mesopotamian time period, okay? So we're talking the Near East, anywhere from 3000 to 500 BC. Yeah, so there's a pretty big time frame there. But astrology originates with the Mesopotamian, Babylonian culture, and it originally, it still is about seeing the future or knowing what's going to happen, less with who you are and personality wise, but kings and rulers and people would use it to forecast, am I going to win a war, or how are the crops going to be this year, or do I have luck in this kind of way, right? So it's still 100% used to tell things about your society or the future, but not necessarily personality wise exactly.
Mm-hmm.
Do you have anything else about that, Ethan?
Yeah, no, that's pretty straightforward, right? We have omens, weather, talking about fate. We have clay tablets that showed, at least by the second millennium, that astrology was a codified practice. So there's the I'm gonna butcher this, but the Babylonian Enuma Anu Enlil. We'll just ask Billy Carson if I got that right. I'm sure that he probably references that all the time. So. There's 7,000 omens linking that to planetary positions, to earthly events. And so clearly there was some connection to what the stars looked like and what was going on Earth. And the idea was that, at least right now, that the gods communicated through the stars. At some point after that, they started being is it the gods communicating through stars, or are the stars the gods? Or are they behind, or the gods animating the stars or telling the stars what to do? Yeah. As far as what more of those pagan things did. And yeah, a lot of royal courts had astronomer priests, and these were the ones who would look at the stars and see what's going on and tell you the omens. it's really not that different than like, you know how like at least in like the Middle East, there's like the practice of like they drink their coffee and then they flip their cups upside down because they have like the coffee grounds in there, and then they flip them up and they try to read the coffee. Like even today, like a couple years ago, we were in Turkey and someone tried doing that and was asking us like, "Do you want us to read your coffee things?" And for them, it's like a pop culture thing, probably how it is now. But it's like kind of like if you think about reading palm readings or reading or coffee grounds or tea leaves, they're trying to read the stars and trying to find something going on there. And then I'm trying to see where specifically it started becoming more personal, because that is the foundations of
It's the
like
Greco-Roman world.
yeah,
Greek
yeah,
world
that's what I was
started,
thinking
yeah.
of. Yeah, so the Greco-Roman world, but before that, around the 7th century in Babylon, they started doing like births and events, so that was a big thing, right?
Mm.
And so there was a lot of thinking the stars could predict births, wars, famines, fate. And then as the Greco world appeared and it morphed and it changed, got more personal. Obviously, we know that there. Something in my notes says the Stoics taught a form of cosmic determinism. So
Yeah.
that might be kind of I'm also wondering if like that is how it is kind of today in my mind. When you meet someone who believes in astrology seriously, they're like, I can't keep a job because I'm a Capricorn. If you're a
Right.
Capricorn listening, I have no idea what that means. I saw a dating that I was an Aries, and I was like, sure. I don't know
Makes
what
so
that.
much sense. Just kidding.
That makes you're just like the
Aries though
coolest
does
one.
sound like the coolest one. Yeah, literally.
I think you're an
Aries
Aries
just sounds
too,
like a
aren't you?
cool.
I have no idea. It's like their
I have
spring.
zero idea. I don't think
No
I
idea.
am. I had a girl tell me one time, but I have no idea what I am.
Of course.
But Aries does sound like the coolest one.
The worst one is Cancer. I would be sad
Yeah,
if
of
I
course.
imagine being a
If you're a
Cancer
Cancer.
and getting cancer.
I wonder what you're like. I wonder statistically if you have any likelihood of like getting it more or less if you're a Cancer.
Yeah. And so, we're making light of like what it is now, but that's kind of how they look at it. Like, oh, I just can't change this personality type. This is how I am. And it's no different than someone be like, I'm just mean to people because I'm an 8 on an Enneagram. I'm like, well, you gotta stop. You can't be a jerk just because you don't want to change. Like
Right.
a lot of anytime someone's blaming their actions based on their personality type, they are doing a wrong thing. But
Of course. Yeah.
So Derry
So originally, like you were saying.
yeah, no, go ahead. I was just gonna ask.
Originally, like you were saying, there's this. Yeah, it's like mostly used for like divination, determining all these things. But it, like I said, in divination, it's specifically from God or from the gods, right? Like he was saying, it's divine direction, or it's the reason that it's like so deterministic from the beginning is because the gods are ordaining things, and like these are the omens or the signs from the gods of what's happening. And like even said, there's some mixed signals about like, are these just mediums that the gods are using to communicate, or are there actual like spiritual bodies? Are these stars real spiritual bodies like the gods inhabit? But no matter what, they're some kind of in some kind of form embodying the gods, or at least the gods' will in some kind of way, right? And then in like the Egyptian and a couple other cultures, you see people like when they die, they become stars. There's a lot of different traditions around it. But as we were saying, when it gets to like the Greek and Roman world, you start to see it be a lot less like deterministic about big events like wars and stuff. Although I'm sure it was still influenced, those like were still influences, but it became much more individualistic, like we were talking about, and it was a lot more about like people's individual destinies, like what was going to happen in their lives and stuff. So more of like the fortune telling kind of horoscope realm that we see today, which is completely related. And then it's not until, of course, like our Enlightenment era and science becoming so popular, and like the real rise of psychology, that it kind of makes a return, because the popularity of this like stays pretty popular throughout human history. Like from the earliest writings we have until now, astrology has been pretty popular although it has changed a little bit from here or there, but the idea of the stars telling us something about the future or something about ourselves has been a pretty common theme. Now, it hasn't been until like the rise of modern psychology that it's changed to be a lot more about like the individual's personality and not like just like the gods determining what's going to happen. You know, just like we did with everything with the Enlightenment, we took a lot of the good parts of being alive, like morality, and we just separated them from God and just said, this is fine. And so now we have this like modern astrology, and they just don't know where the power comes from. They're like, oh yeah, like it's deterministic. Like you can tell things about yourself in the future by it, but we can't tell you how. It's definitely not like some kind of spiritual force, right? We just don't think that far because everything is like from psychology, everything is just rationalized. Like this is just the way things are because of your personality, because of when you were born, because of the stars, because of the forces that they have on our planet based off of gravity. And there's just all of these like rationalizations on it, which hey, maybe there is some weight to that we just don't understand. There's some weird stuff about the moon that people have realized for a long time, and we don't have to get into it, but it's interesting. So I think though that there is, because the history of this has been very spiritual, like it's for almost all of astrology's history, it's been tied with the spiritual. Like we have info from astrology that has come to us from the gods. And so forever it's been spiritual. And so why would we think it's not spiritual now is the question, right? Like, do we think that the planets are purely just like big balls of fire, or do we think that there's spiritual things behind them? And then how do you define that? Like, is there actual spirits in the stars themselves, or is it just that like maybe demons are using like putting people's thoughts in people's heads based off of the positions of the stars to influence them? We're gonna get into it, but any other comments, Ethan, about like the history or things that you found in your research there?
Yeah, the one thing to note is like we treat it as pretty. I mean, most people treat it as silly and don't take it very seriously. Even those
guys,
most people, like I know, like I think like maybe mostly young women are really into it. I gotta find like the specific studies of in my notes here, but like among the believers or consumers today, 20% consult astrology for fun, and only like less than 1% rely on it for heavy decision making. Like, oh, I live by that. So of the people who do it, 20% of them are still like, it's just for fun. It's just a goof, right? Sure. And usage does tend to be more common among younger women. So 43% of women between 18 to 49, and then 20% of adults in general. So still a majority of women, even young women, don't do it, and those who do it just are mostly for fun. And so it's kind of this like cute cultural thing that like, what's it going to be? And there's apps and there's little things like that. But for most of it's like, at least when it was dominant in culture, it was even in the like Islamic and medieval world, like a pretty respectable academic venture or academic study. Yeah, there were professors, there were studies like in universities. Like you think gender studies is like a dumb class, like they had astrology studies, but this one actually like would study the stars and see if it was like they had different medicines based on your sign and when you got sick and the position of the stars when you got sick.
Well, it's not dumb if it worked, right? If there's real spiritual power behind it, like
if there's real demons behind it. Yeah, that's true. Even like law courses, they might cover astrology's moral implications. Like when you're considering this person's a criminal, it's like, oh, of course they are. They're trying not to pick on the Capricorns. It's just the only one that comes to mind. But it's like, I would double down on the Capricorns. They're a Capricorn. They're bad. That makes sense. Imagine how dehumanizing that could go if someone took it seriously and was a ruler, where they're like, let's round up everyone of this type of person because you were born here. We're gonna put you in jail. But yeah, even parts of Christianity studied it, right? So Augustine, around 400, earliest one church father that I found that wrote about it. Let's see. He didn't like it because he felt like it undermined free will. It seemed like astrology at the time of Augustine was very deterministic, like you will live this life because of this. And he's like, that undermines like the human moral arguments, like why, like it excuses moral behavior. If you're like, oh, you're just like
Mm.
predestined to be this terrible person because you were born on this day and the stars were there. Augustine was like, that's not true. He's like, no, that undermines God's sovereignty and undermines your moral responsibility to obey God. So he didn't like that. And then I'm trying to see what he says. What he says about it. Um, yeah, he has like it says astrology implies a spiritual causality that competes with God's providence and human freedom. So that was Augustine's problem. He felt the way culture understood astrology is that it competed with God and made stars, or like the demons behind the stars, the setters of events in people's minds of like civilizations or omens or famines, when biblically that's all from God. Right? God's the one who controls the weather. God's the one who decides kings. God's the one who sets boundaries. And so it would take away from God in that sense. And then you fast forward like 1,000 years, or yeah, around 1,000 years, and like Thomas Aquinas comes on the scene. And Thomas Aquinas was in a world in which this was really popular. And so he was kind of taught around it, or taught it. But when he looks at it, there was like a specific thing that was different. He was like kind of like using it, but not in the way it was popular to use it. Him being a philosopher, made the observation that like, well, twins are born and they live radically different lives. So how is it that the stars are controlling their lives? And so it's called like his like twin argument. I think it was Aquinas who popularized that.
Using his brain.
Yeah, he's like, wait a second,
Hey.
something seems different here. So there might be some ways to say like, yes, stars could influence people's tendencies, but doesn't justify moral behavior. So for Aquinas, it's possible he had this idea that like, oh yeah, you might have a tendency to act a certain way because of how the stars were, but that doesn't mean you're bound to that. And his idea was like, we know the moon affects tides. And so he's like, well, maybe if the moon can affect tides and pull water in certain directions, maybe the stars can have some effect on the human as well. Like we're still physical, the ocean's physical, moon's planetary, stars planetary. So that was the kind of the there, but still, of course, as Christians have always done, didn't make an excuse for moral, determinism or like moral prison. Like you still had to overcome that. You might have a tendency to do something, but you really had to, surrender to God and overcome it. And so it's interesting to see that, yeah, Christians interacted with this and weren't, Augustine didn't like it because, like I said, it undermines God's sovereignty to him. And,
That it's
that's
so
fair.
deterministic, right?
Yeah. But I'm thinking like, I didn't do enough detailed research in the church history specifically to find out if they called it demonic that early. And like right now we would, I'm not surprised they did. But yeah, it's interesting that they were still raised in a world like Aquinas and Augustine lived in cultures where this was a very respectable worldview. It wasn't pushed to the side and like just a cute little thing. Like this was like guided societies. And so that's really interesting.
I mean, it's a big deal for them because their whole world is like, it comes out of like the Babylonian Empire. And like, this is a very popular belief. And then it's also very popular in the Greek Empire, and it's very popular in the Roman Empire. And so the worlds that they're living in, they're coming out of, their society's birthed out of, are all like pretty entrenched in this idea that the stars kind of determine things about you and that there are spiritual beings behind them. So a lot of the early church fathers are writing, like you were quoting, rejecting Christians having anything to do with this kind of like a sort of divination, right? Like they're saying, hey, look, your future is determined by God, not by these stars that are controlled by or embodied by it's like some mystical spiritual beings that are created by God, right? Because everything is created by God. And so they're saying, hey, if there's powers behind these things, then they're not the power of God. Like God for sure has control over them, obviously paraphrasing, but it should be rejected. Like Ethan said, one of the reasons they gave is because it's like so deterministic. And God is the one who like works with us and determines stuff like that. So they like what the stars were in general. I don't know if we want to get into that, Ethan, or not, but
Repeat that last part. You cut off a little bit. I didn't hear what you said. What was your question?
I was just saying, I don't know if you want to get into like what the church fathers believed like the stars were, like if they were actual, like if they're actual like living things, or if they were spiritual beings, or if they were controlled by the gods, or what.
Yeah, I think a couple. It's been like up and down, right? There's been some who think so, or some who speculate. At the very least, people were speculating if stars were conscious things. Even C.S. Lewis, Gavin Ortland made a video about that. If you guys want to go check that out, C.S. Lewis pondered if stars could be alive. Early Christians believed that, maybe it's possible. So, like Origen on his first principles speculates if stars and planets might be rational, or if they possess souls, or if they participate in knowing God's order. And then there are a couple others here, right? We could look at. Obviously, I think Origen is he still a heretic, a condemned heretic? Is he still a heretic?
I think he was. I don't know for sure. I think it was condemned and then uncondemned.
Uncondemned. They're like, actually, he's good.
Actually, he's fine.
Actually, Clement apparently maybe uses animated cosmic language. So like, stars obey God. The heavens participate in divine order. Maybe more metaphorical from there. I think Basil the Great's opinion seems like they were inanimate or did not possess souls. So it ranges right throughout history. Augustine apparently firmly rejected this. He said apparently stars are not living rational beings. And so, yeah, it seems all over the place. But we were talking before the show about the possibility of like how to read the scriptures. And did the scriptures have anything to say about that? Do you want to go that route as well?
We should, for sure. My understanding of especially the patristic fathers is that the only real debate among them, because most of them believe that they were some kind of living creature. Now, whether like the thing that they would argue about was, are they living things that are divine in themselves, or are they living things that are controlled by angels or other divine beings? But I think it was pretty common belief that they were alive, that like there was in some way they were created living embodied beings and not just inanimate objects. And the later you go in history, the closer you get to, or the further away you get from that view, and the closer you get to them just being inanimate objects that are still like controlled by God, obviously, right? But what does the Bible say about it? So there's obviously a lot of debate here about these certain passages, but we can just go through a few of them. Unless, Ethan, there was something you wanted to say about what I just said about church history.
No, I only had a little bit of those perusing. You probably have more details on church history than I do, so we'll just take your word for it.
Yay. I could be wrong too. That's just like what I've read. Like church history is so vast, so I just have my.
It's only 2,000 years of
true
deep thought.
True. All I really care about is the beginning, if I'm not lying.
Like up until the Great Schism.
Wacky. Yeah. Later on.
That is true. Middle Ages.
As soon as they get more than one pope, I stopped listening. As soon as we get 3 or 4 popes, I'm not listening anymore.
Right. Yeah, I should probably read some of the. I want to get more into the church history this year.
Dude, there's one point in church history. This is such a side topic, but there's one point where, and I think I've told you this story before, but the Pope. So with Constantine, the church becomes like the political establishment of the church, and so now there's like political authority with like the church. Then you start getting popes and all that kind of stuff. And I'm sure Catholics are gonna hate that I just said that, but anyways, it gets like real muddled because it becomes so politicized, and you have like kings and popes sharing power, like who has more power. And at one point, the like popes had like lost some of their power, and there was like some kings that were ruling at the time, and the Pope just decrees, hey, actually, I have all the power again, and I'm taking it away from the kings. And the kings are like, cool, well, we're just gonna kill you. And so they just came and just killed them, and then took all the power back. It's pretty funny. There's so many like just kind of silly stories.
How do they get a pope after that? If they believe in
apostolic succession, they just appointed anyone that didn't have that opinion.
I guess if you have apostolic
it's the same way, the
succession and you have a
conclave.
bunch of bishops, right? They voted in the first pope. You can just vote in a new pope.
Yeah, Pope doesn't have to like lay his hands on the next Pope or anything. It's just a
Oh,
um
I guess yeah.
yeah
Pope Francis died and didn't lay his hands on Pope
yeah.
Leo.
They have a conclave and like vote
Can
in the
you
next Pope.
can you impeach a pope?
I'm sure you could. I don't know. I don't know how that works. I'm not sure.
What if they went to impeach a pope and then the pope said ex cathedra, you can't do that?
You can't do that, dude? Catch 22. What do you do in that situation?
All the Catholics are gonna be in the comments like that's a non-reality. It doesn't even matter. We don't have to consider it. Okay.
That's funny.
Anyways,
Wow.
back to stars and church history and the Bible.
Back to stars. Okay,
So well,
we got
before we move forward into that real quick, because I
Sure.
wanted to make the note about like there is a difference between the belief about stars and their sentience and astrology and constellations, because constellations were
Sure.
like groups of stars, and we're talking and the Bible and church history is talking about like individual stars. So whatever the scriptures or church history talked about is like individual stars that you see, maybe not like groups of stars and their effects on it. Because like spoiler alert, there's like some scripture, and we talked about church history where there seems like the stars might be some type of thing that could be conscious.
Sure.
And so one might mistake that and think, oh, Christian astrology, like you can, these are heavenly things. The constellations are one conscious being. At least maybe not my take on it. And so there's a difference between the biblical perspective of stars and sentience and astrological effect on the world today that we're going to get into.
Yes. Okay, you ready?
Yeah.
Okay. So there's mixed ways that people interpret these passages now, right? As I read these, though, I want you to think of them from the perspective, because a lot of these are from the Old Testament. Think about them from the perspective of someone who's living in Babylon, and this is what people believe, right? Like it's just the culture believes this, right? And there isn't a lot of evidence outside of that pretty standard cultural belief that the stars are alive and are spiritual in some way, whether they're mediums or they're spiritual themselves. There's not a lot of evidence that people had other views. Like this is just like the main view. So when you read passages, like I'm going to read a lot, but Job 38, 4-7 says, "Where were you when I laid the foundations of the earth? When the morning stars sang together and all the sons of God shouted for joy." So maybe someone would say, well, I think that's poetry. You say, well, okay, sure. Like maybe could be poetry, but think about it in the context that they're in. The context they're in is that the stars could actually sing and proclaim God's glory. And so it says here that the star is singing to the Lord. In Judges 5:20, it talks about stars or in the heaven fighting. It says, from heaven the stars fought, and from their course they fought against Sisera. I don't know that that is.
Sisera, or something like that.
Sisera. Yeah. Okay, later on, I'm gonna skip all the passage about Revelation just because I think it gets too into the weeds there to talk about. But you get this idea of the hosts of heaven. This category of the hosts of heaven in the Bible can refer to angels or can refer to stars. So they're kind of intermingling definitionally, at least. So when you hear it or when you read it, sometimes it's referring to one, sometimes it's referring to other. In my opinion, they're so intertwined because if you look at ancient cosmology, you see that they have this picture of the earth, and then they have like the sun, moon, and stars above the earth and this firmament over them, and they're all in like the same area together. And so the angels are viewed as being in the heavens, like they're up there in the sky with the stars. And so it's like they dwell in the same place, like angels and stars are in the same place. And so whether they're intertwined with each other or they're just existing in the same realm, that's why they are so interchangeable, in my opinion, the heavenly host term and being about stars or being about planets, because they exist like in the same realm cosmologically for them, at least. Would you disagree with that, Ethan?
What's the specific question? I was reading some of those verses that you mentioned.
Just about like this, the stars and the angels kind of like living in the same area in ancient cosmology.
Yeah, it seems like that is they're always mentioned together. I will say, like, to give credit where credit's due, I think it's fair to speculate with Job and Judges. Both of those are in song format, so for the same reason, we wouldn't say Earth is flat because Psalms might say like the circle of the Earth. We have to be consistent. So yeah, maybe they're not, but it seems like there's that argument where from the heavens they fought and from their courses they fought against Sisera. So you have stars fighting, but there's also like other verses that aren't song. It seems like Daniel 8 is just a historical, and at Daniel 8:10 it says he's seeing he is seeing a vision, so you could speculate that as well, but it talks about this horn growing even to the host of heavens, and some of the host and some of the stars it threw down to the ground and trampled on them. So the host and stars again mentioned together. And so, yeah, I think it's fair to say biblically, like hosts of heaven and stars seem like they're always paired together. And that could lead to the inference of the worldview being that stars are the host of heavens.
Yeah. I mean, there's a spiritual connotation no matter what. You can read verses from Deuteronomy 4:19, which says it's basically a warning against the Israelites worshiping stars. And so God knows that, like, hey, like they believe that like the heavenly bodies, the heavenly hosts are real things, and that they're so like they're actually like spiritual beings because they're tempted to worship them. Like they have actual power. Like they're giving them worship outside of Christian culture or outside of the Jewish culture. And so God's like, hey, don't do that. Like you're worshiping me. You're not worshiping these other spiritual beings that are out there, at least in their view, whether or not they are spiritual beings. This is what the Jews thought. So when we read passages in this context, like for example, there's another one in Psalms, which definitely is a song, right? But in Psalms 148, 1-3, it says, praise him, all his angels. Praise him, sun and moon. Praise him, all you singing stars. And so a lot of times, like stars are embodied, and we look back at that as like, oh, it's poetic language. But yeah, if you think about who it's written to, though, like in the context, those people be like, oh yeah, like stars actually sing. Like they actually do proclaim the glory of God. Like they're actual real embodied things. Not that they're God themselves, but that they actually have some kind of ability or agency to sing and praise God. So I think it'd be pretty hard to argue that at least in the Near Eastern context, they didn't view them as some kind of thing that's alive in some way.
Well, even in Revelation, right, verses 1 in 120 in Revelation, it says, as for the mystery of the 7 stars, which you saw in my right hand, and the 7 gold lampstands, the 7 stars are the angels of the 7 churches, and the 7 lampstands are the 7 churches. So there, yeah, it was again a vision in Revelation, but it's directly correlated that, hey, the stars are the angels. Like the stars you saw are the angels of the churches. And then Jesus says he saw Satan fall like lightning from the heavens.
Yeah, from the heavens.
And there's other language like that that is about stars falling from heaven. Right. And so it does seem to be like, at least historically, that, and I think it's pretty well, I wouldn't be surprised if this is well established, that the ancient Hebrews and then maybe even New Testament Christians worldview was kind of like stars are beings of some kind. And it seems like if they're angels, we know angels can go astray, and we know they have rebelled. And so maybe there's demonic angels and heavenly angels that are both up in the cosmos looking like stars.
Yeah, it's interesting. So I think it's, at least in my mind, it's pretty like solidified that at least in the Near Eastern context, between 3rd and 1st centuries, that there's some kind of view that they're like living embodied things. Whether or not they are today is kind of a different question. But it seems to be like what the Bible sort of like says.
Yeah, was it kind of like that's what they thought, but it's not true, or that's what they thought and it is true still today? And then the question and where this kind of gets into astrology rather than just a study of like stars is like, okay, so if they are demonic or heavenly, can they have positive or negative effects on the earth? And that's
Sure.
probably the bridge from the Christian worldview into astrology and questioning
Sure.
and examining that. That is, if we can see from the Bible that there's a lot of songs, a lot of visions that pair host of heavens or stars and angels together, then it's like, okay, from a Christian biblical worldview, if angels and stars are almost synonymous, and we know angels and affect the world, we know angels fell and became fallen angels and affect the world, then can they affect the world from where they are in heaven?
Sure. Sure.
That would be kind
Just
of
to
the
read a
bridge.
couple more verses to finish like the biblical part of this. From the New Testament, it references back to some of these ideas just in saying that there are powers in the heavens, right? So Luke 21 says, then there will be signs in the sun and the moon and the stars, and the powers of the heavens will be shaken. So it's saying there's some kind of power in the heavens. Ephesians 6:12 says, rulers, authorities, cosmic powers over this present darkness, spiritual forces of evil in the heavenly places. So their view is still pretty similar, that there's some kind of power, there's some kind of authority, although they view it as a negative thing. They're saying cosmic powers, at least Ephesians does, says cosmic powers over this present darkness, spiritual forces of evil in the heavenly places. So they view these as some kind of spiritual power, some kind of spiritual force, and it's negative, right? And I think that totally makes sense because the culture around them is worshiping and exalting these heavenly forces and these heavenly powers. And Christians are saying, hey, like, have nothing to do with this. Don't worship the stars, right? And I think the Christian view, in my opinion, and this is what we'll get into like the next portion of this, is that the stars declare the glory of God. God is in control of them. They're the heavenly hosts, and they proclaim his glory. And so whether or not they're embodied real things or not is up for debate. But I think that would be like the difference between the Christian and the non-Christian view there.
Yeah, I'm trying to read if it was common about stars. I think it is. But yeah.
What was common about stars?
If the worldview was that angels and stars were the same thing, and I'm pretty sure they were. Yeah.
Well, I think they influenced each other. I don't think that they were the exact same. Yes, for sure. Some people thought they were the same.
Yeah, I mean, as far as the commentary on like Job 38:7, it says, when the morning stars sang together, all the sons of joy and all the sons of God shouted for joy. It says that the morning star, usually planets such as Mars and Venus, were worshipped as divine beings in the ancient Near East and were personified as part of the heavenly host of Israel. In the context of Job 38, these stars are parallel to created angelic beings. And so at least in
is this
that...
Dan Lewis's commentary? Whose
No,
commentary
this is the IVP. This is the...
Oh, nice.
Which is InterVarsity Press. I can check out Dan Lewis real quick. He probably has a whole thing on stars. He's probably got like a 12-part series, all 4 hours long on stars.
You probably just go to your church and ask him.
I did. I had talked to him about after church on the other day. I was like, we were talking about infant baptism, and he just knew every argument. He's like, I'm not telling you which one to believe, but there's really good arguments on both sides, and here's this. But then he's so humble, and he's like, the older I get, the more I know about nothing. And I'm like,
the more I know about nothing.
You've written commentaries on everything.
The older I get, the less I know. That's awesome.
He's a good guy.
What a cool guy. Yeah.
But yeah, let's move on to the next part of the podcast then. Covered pretty thoroughly the Bible.
Sure.
And I'm assuming pretty accurately. Maybe someone can challenge us if they want.
We could talk about like what we think the Christian view of the stars should be. Like, are they actual like things, like beings, or are they just like the giant fireballs? How does what you believe about that change your view of the stars? Does that impact your theology or how they interact with them at all? And then we can talk about how to interact with modern day astrology. Does that sound good?
Yes, sir.
Cool.
Let's do it.
What do you think then about like what stars are today? Like in my mind, I don't know if it makes that big of a difference what you believe about it, because like I just don't interact with them that much. Like whether the singing praises.
Yeah. We both live
like whether the singing
in the city.
Things to the Lord. True. Yeah, we don't see them that much.
We don't even see them.
Well, I live outside the city, actually, so I do see them all the time. but not many. I don't see that many, but there's for sure more
Dude,
than
I
where you're
love
at.
the stars, man. I
Yeah.
when I worked in when I was worked in the factory, I would wake up and go outside at the same time every day, leaving for work, and throughout the year in the same position, I would walk out and be like, I lived in the country when I worked in the factory, and so I woke up and walked out at like 3:30 in the morning, and on a clear night, the Big Dipper would just be beaming down on me, or like Orion's belt would just be right there. I always loved it. That was my favorite part of the morning, was waking up and walking outside and seeing the stars. And I was just like, oh my gosh, this is amazing. This is incredible. And I was always just blown away by God's vastness, that like those exist. And this is maybe like the first way to look at stars as a Christian, at least first way, because that's my first way I did it. Is I looked at the stars and saw how beautiful they are. I remember as a kid one time my grandpa lived way out in the country and we saw the Milky Way. And I remember being like, oh my gosh, that's insane. And thinking
Yeah.
like, all that exists. And God likes humans more.
Yeah.
And you're like, what? And I think that's really important to say, because if you're to really excel at being a Christian and following Jesus, you have to know how much God loves you. And so just for application, like if you're going to be a solid Christian, it starts with knowing the love of God. And when you see the beauty of the world and the universe he's created, and then you recognize like he loves me more than all of that, that's like how much value do we ascribe to that? And God puts even more on us. It's like, oh, that's amazing to feel so loved by God in that sense. And that spurs you on to loving him and therefore obeying him. But then getting more like detailed as far as like what we think about the actual stars, not just like what it means like for us, is I would say up until about a few months ago, I was like, yeah, stars are just things in the sky. They're gas balls. And now I hearing that like early Christians speculated they could be alive of some kind, conversations with different people and their views about it, and then seeing Gavin Ortland's video and then learning this, I'm like, huh. I'm like, what if it's true that the world is more alive or the universe is more alive than I ever expected? And if that was the worldview of the writers throughout time, how much of my worldview has been shaped by the Enlightenment period and just like materialism? And it's like, yeah, what if they were alive? And this is the cool speculation. No one knows, and no one can say anything, because for a long time, no one knew trees were alive, right? They were like, sure, maybe they grew. So they're like, oh yeah, they're alive. They kind of grow. But no one knew that of the like the root system sending nutrients from healthy trees to unhealthy trees, and the whole forest as a vibrant ecosystem working together in the plants. No one knew that. Like, there's studies done where plants know who you are, know who their caretakers are, and they have set up like little readers on them, like the lie detector test to measure like anxiety or whatever. And they would have one guy walk in and cut a plant, and they would take measurements. And it got to the point where the plants started freaking out whenever that guy walked in. Even if he didn't cut them, they remembered, all the plants remembered, this guy kills us. And so they were like not happy about it. And so if plants have that vast of an awareness, then it's like, and we can't even get close to stars. I personally don't think we've ever been to the moon. So I'm like, we haven't even left the planet. Like, how can we even talk about just stars being just balls of gas when we have never even been close to them? We can look at them, but like even people that I've
stars
talked
are inside
to,
the firmament, so
well, if you're a flat
there's no
earther,
space
sure.
in reality.
Sure.
Yeah.
But it's like I'm not a flat earther yet.
kidding.
No, just kidding. But there's there's a lot to say about like we just don't know, and you can't just like arrogantly rule something out because it's not popular. It's not taught, because we just can't know. And so I'm wondering, like, can stars be alive like trees at the very least? Maybe they're not
Sure.
conscious beings who have wills and emotions and obedience and disobedience. Now, maybe they could be, because if they're hosts of heavens and angels, there potentially could be that question. But maybe at the very least, they're alive like stars. And there's something out there that we just don't know about. That's just waiting to be discovered whenever, if we ever get off Earth. And more than just the atmosphere. But it's like, that is such a beautiful thought. And then have you ever seen people, at least the claim is, obviously it's the internet, and you know the old saying, don't believe everything on the internet, don't believe everything you see on the internet. There's never been more true than the world of AI. But have you ever seen those videos that they claim are like high-powered magnifying glasses or magnifying lens on stars, and they don't look like balls of gas, at least. Have you ever seen those?
I think I have seen those. Yeah.
Yeah, those are really cool to imagine. If those are real, then it's like, oh, that doesn't look like a ball of gas. What is that?
Yeah, very interesting.
What do you think? And then I guess from here, after we talk about like what we think, we can talk about what that means for astrology today and Christians and astrology.
Hard to say. I think unanimously it was the view in the first century. Problem is that it was also the view in the first century that the earth was flat, or at least in Jewish cosmology. So I don't believe that. But do I believe that the stars are somehow, and this is the word that's used often, embodied in some way, right? For example, not embodied, ensouled. So, for example, animals are ensouled in scripture. Like it references them as having a soul, and it also references them as having the nefesh, like the breath of life from God.
Oh no.
Okay. So are planets ensouled the same way animals are ensouled, and that they're created by God and have some kind of agency or being? I'm not sure. I think that's what the Near Eastern context people believed. Is that what I believe? I really don't know. If I go back and forth on if it's like a metaphorical singing of God's praise or if it's a literal singing of his praise, I think I want to go with that they are alive, because they are alive and they are ensouled some way. I just don't, it's hard for me to get away from my Enlightenment context and just trying to rationalize everything, because really most of the evidence that I see is for the position that they are ensouled in some way. Like I don't know how to get away from that, because that's what most of the early church fathers believed. It seems like that's what Near Eastern people believed, and that's what scripture kind of references and teaches. And so I want to say I think that's what I believe, that they are embodied in some way or ensouled in some way, and they actually can sing the praises of the Lord in some way that I don't understand, and not just a metaphorical like, wow, it's really pretty, it's singing the praises of the Lord, right, kind of way. But on the other hand, you have like in the Psalms where it says that like animals praise the Lord, although animals are ensouled as well. But then you have like mountains and trees that are alive in some way, but they don't have souls. Also like praise the Lord. And it says that even rocks will cry out and praise the Lord. So I don't know. I would lean towards that they are ensouled things. But I don't think it's a big deal if you don't think that they are. I think it's what the Bible teaches. Like that's the perspective of the people of that time. But does that change anything about how I worship or about how I think about anything? Not really, but it's kind of fun to believe and to think about. So I think that's my perspective right now.
Yeah, I think one of the benefits to believing it is that you keep your mind open to be in awe of the universe and the world God's placed us in a
True,
more
yeah.
where you're just more you're like, wow, you just like have a deeper wonder when you go out camping.
Wow.
It's more meaningful to think you might be alive worshiping God.
Yeah.
And I think like with the animals, you're like, the Bible says the animals praise God. Like, how do we know they aren't? Sure, they just sound like noise to us, but we don't know. We don't speak the language of squirrels. We don't know if they're not in their way thanking God for the nuts they find, or the birds like thanking God. And we have no idea what is happening. And just to sit there and think like, wow, they are. And the way I look at it, I remember one time I was looking at this lake, and and behind it was a forest, and I was up on a hill looking down. And it was a time in my life when I was really trying to seek the Lord for provision. And I just remember like the Lord speaking like, Ethan, there's a whole ecosystem that I'm sustaining in the forest and under the water that you cannot understand and you do not see. And none of them are anxious. They're all obeying me. They're all just being what they're supposed to be and obeying me, and I'm taking care of them. So if you just obey me and do what I tell you and be as you're supposed to be, which is my son and example of him to the world, then you'll be all right. And I was like, wow, that's true. Like, like the animals worship God in the way that they like unanxiously just do what they're created to do. And so you could say animals are worshiping God. And so I'm like, yeah, and maybe they're praising God also with their noises that they're making. We know dolphins somehow communicate like with different pods. We've picked up that where there's like, or killer whales, like different pod, like there's like a one dialect of like noises they make. This pod over here, or I guess over here, makes a different noise. And then when they watch the two pods together, they pick up different noises and they're like, oh my gosh, these animals have whole languages that we don't understand. And it's like, we have no idea if they're not just like, teaching, like the dolphins are like, oh yeah, welcome to the world, son. Let me tell you about our creator who created, like we get to do, and like, they're just talking about God. How cool would that be? Just like, it keeps your mind open to be in awe of the world God's made that might make you more in awe of God and therefore worship him more
too.
And it's not,
I agree.
It won't have a negative attack. It won't have a negative inference on or effect on your spirituality to think that the world and the things around us are more alive than we realize. It'll probably actually cause you to love creation and be a better steward of it more. Like you would probably care about animal cruelty more if you thought about them being able to worship God and you're like, they're being oppressed. Like, oh my gosh, that's terrible.
Yeah. True. Great point. Yeah. Great point, Ethan. Nice.
Thank you. Said something liberal and Derek's like, all right.
Wow. So how should we...
Animal rights, all right.
Whoa, okay. From flat earther to animal rights. Nice. We didn't land on the moon. We should take care of our chickens.
You got to be able to hold tension in both.
Sure, true.
Just holding space.
So how should we
for
view
flat Earth and animal rights?
Holding space is one of my least favorite terms in the entire world. It's the stupidest sounding thing I've ever heard. Like holding space. Like why do we gotta make up new things? Like just say something.
Just respect people.
Just respect people. Well, I'm not gonna hold some space for you. You can just say what you want.
Just holding space. I have no time for that.
You can say whatever you want. I'll listen. But anyways, how should we as Christians, I think it's a pretty straightforward answer, but how should we view modern day astrology? Because even though modern day astrology isn't really spiritual, most people who, like you said at the beginning of the podcast, most people who are into astrology are mostly into it for fun, right? You said like 20% of women, or was it? Or
40% of women participate. And then of the people who do it, or maybe 20% of people, let me look at it again. 20% of something do it for fun. It might be 20% of the people, but it's probably just 20% of people. Like, are just like, it's just for fun. You keep talking,
so
though, I'll let you know.
That people mostly do it for fun, right? So they're not like, this is my religion. I think that there's spirits behind it. Well, no matter what, whether you think that it's spiritual or not, if you're worshiping something that's not God, you're offering some kind of spiritual offering to something that there's probably a spirit behind, right? And so, you find it, Ethan?
Yeah, it's not very clear to me on the data because it says the math's not mathing. It just says among believers or consumers, 20% consult astrology mostly for fun, 10% for personal insight, and 1% for heavy decision making. I'm like, what about the rest of the 69%?
Interesting. Well, anyways, for the people who use it, it doesn't seem that serious. But does that matter, right? For most of history, people have viewed the stars and astrology as kind of negative, and the Bible seems to claim that there is some kind of evil spiritual reality behind the worship of stars. And so whether or not stars are actual like spiritual beings that are evil, or if the enemy just uses demons to communicate through stars in some way, which the early church warns about, we should probably be careful of it, right?
Yeah. And the biggest Bible verse to kind of talk about not doing astrology today and why Christians should be cautious is in Deuteronomy, right? Deuteronomy 18:10 through 12 talks about forbidding divination. And divination is trying to like figure out the world through magic, kind of. And technically, you know, if you're gonna like, technically, astrology and magic or witchcraft are historically separate things, right? Astrology was a respected university city type endeavor, and witchcraft was more on the outskirts. Like there were like,
Well, maybe originally
you know,
they were kind of
originally they're
together, though.
separate, but right, and as societies have changed over the last 5,000 years, they're very close. If you go to astrology.com, it talks about psychic readings, palm readings, tarot cards.
Well, I think
And
they were together originally and then came apart, and now they're together again.
Yeah, I'm not. Yeah, maybe I'm not so sure, but whatever it is, today at least they're together and they go together. And if it's possible that stars can be potentially angels, we know angels have fallen, so if stars can be fallen angels, right? Maybe there's something there. At the very least, what I would say is maybe there's not demons behind the stars that you're looking at, but there's demons behind the belief that the stars affect your life. Like if you believe that the stars are determining this about, like X about you, right? You believe that the demons can latch onto that and then make a whole world view for you that is void of God. And maybe not even dark demonic things will happen. It might just be you're just not a Christian and the demons are fine with that. They're like, all right, as long as you're not obeying God, we don't care. So yeah, have your little horoscope and don't go to church and get convicted of your sin. Fine. But it's like, you know, you're consulting.
Get cool little tattoos.
Yeah. It's taking the focus from
the coffee shop.
Yeah. Work at a coffee shop. That's
Drive
so
a Forerunner.
Funny. Be a life coach. But it's taking the focus of spirituality off of God, right? You shouldn't be consulting your horoscope or your sign on what your day will look like or what you should do with your day or personality traits. You should be consulting the living God. It's also like astrology nowadays, if we're just looking at stars and say stars for this instance are just planetary things like the gas things. It's no different than crystals. Like people consult crystals for things. I'm like, guys, those are rocks.
Or yoga.
Yoga too. It's like, those are just rocks. You can pray to the living God and you're choosing rocks. You could pray to the living God and you're choosing to look at patterns in the sky, which I've never understood constellations because I've never seen the pictures that I talk about.
It's so arbitrary.
I'm like, how do you guys see this? I'm like,
yeah.
Good on you for having that imagination, but I don't see it. I just see it a lot. I see Big Dipper because I can see the. But I'm like, when they talk about Orion, I'm like, I know his belt because it's 3 in a row. I don't know where his dogs are or his arms or what he's doing. It's just some people do, but it's like, guys,
the lists are also never the same. Like China had a different list than the Roman Empire had.
Yeah.
It was like, like we're seeing the same guy, but we're making out different constellations.
Exactly. And so really as Christians, right, I think most people probably know it's like Christians shouldn't engage with it today, but there are probably Christians who just like pop culture, like, oh, what's my little BuzzFeed thing? And I'm like, I don't know if you should be doing a BuzzFeed quiz about it just because it's a BuzzFeed quiz. Maybe I'm very millennial for referencing that. But I'm like, I just like, it shouldn't be this cutesy thing that Christians engage with because I think God hates it. So if God hates it, even if it's like harmless, we shouldn't engage with it. It's like, it's harmless.
Sure.
Yeah. You wouldn't watch like a show with nudity if your spouse hated it because it's harmless. It's like, no, it's not. You're looking at that. That is affecting you.
Well, I view it the same way I view yoga. Like, even though most people view yoga as a non-spiritual thing now, when I say most people, I mean like the same people who are doing astrology. They view astrology as a non-spiritual thing as well. They just view it as like, oh, it's helping me with my personality or me to figure out like who I am and what makes me happy or what partner I should be with. Like the point is not what you believe about it fully, but the point is that you're getting some kind of revelation, some kind of knowledge and information from a source that has strictly traditionally been associated with spiritual darkness scripturally. right? Because you're not getting the information from God, you're getting it from cosmic powers, which the Bible directly references as evil. And so I wouldn't have anything to do with it for that reason directly, the same way that you shouldn't do yoga. Like the purpose of yoga is to awaken some kind of serpent energy, some divine serpent energy in your body. Like that's literally you can like look up the Hindu definition of what yoga is. Like the point of it is to become like spiritually awakened. And no matter how unspiritual you think it is or how much you think it's just stretching, like it does have spiritual roots and you're receiving some kind of like physical revelation from it. And so there's going to be associations spiritually with it, whether you think there is or not. Now, are you going to become demon possessed because of it? Probably not, right? But like you should still
Hopefully
be worried
not.
about it because maybe you could. I don't know.
Yeah. It's
Like I've heard stories.
Are you going to try heroin or meth because
Exactly.
maybe I won't get addicted to it? It's like you might not get
Yeah.
addicted to it, but the chances are pretty high.
Try it. Yeah. Like
What?
just think about it rationally. Like what has it been used for most of history? Yoga. It's been used for spiritual things. Astrology has been used for spiritual things for most of history. So why would you try to use it in a non-spiritual way? Just stretch. Just take a personality test that's made up by people who study psychology. Like,
Or
it's
don't
gonna
take
do
a
the same thing
personality
for you.
test. Just kidding. You can.
I love personality tests.
I like some. I like the big five. I don't like the Enneagram. I don't think the Enneagram Christians should use because of the origins of how the definitions became about. That's a whole nother podcast we've already talked about. But yeah, actually, personality tests are fun. They're nice.
They are fun. You know what? They are fun.
Just be a good person. Like if you get angry,
Don't make your whole life off of it, but it can be helpful.
yeah. Here's what you need to do before you take a personality test. If you have a negative characteristic that you don't like about yourself, ask yourself why you do that, and then think back in your life about when you've done that and what's caused that. And these are called triggers, right? We're about to go into a whole therapy session.
Oh,
You just gotta be like, oh,
Ethan's.
I get
Ethan's been to therapy
mad.
like 3 times.
What's that?
I said Ethan's been to therapy like 3 times.
True.
This is
True.
his lesson.
I've also just educated myself. I'm like, oh, that's a trigger.
100%.
Oh. Or I just like, if I get angry or irrationally upset, at least I recognize in the moment, like a little bit after the moment, like, that was irrational. And then I have to be like, why was I irrational? Why do I have this irrational thing?
Yeah.
Yeah.
What you were gonna say?
I was just gonna make jokes that you don't have to do some of these personality tests or astrological things if you just do some introspection, some journaling.
Sure.
Ask the Lord to convict you and conform you to his image, right? And maybe that's the thing, right? In astrology, you are trying to become a better person. You are trying to conform yourself to an image of something. And as a Christian, you are to be conformed to the image of Christ, and it's Christ that does that in you. So another reason not to consult astrology or mediums or tarot cards as a Christian is because all that transformative work is supposed to be done through Christ, and all those other things I just mentioned are all done through demons. So don't go through demons to try to accomplish what God is trying to do already.
Yeah. Pretty good.
Pretty good.
Pretty good.
Pretty banger of a statement if I do say so
That's pretty
myself.
Let's just say that's pretty good.
I have a document in my notes app that says great quotes by me. And if I ever like am rambling and make a
That's
great
crazy.
quote, I'm like, that's awesome. I got to write that down.
That's insane.
I should read some.
That's because you're an Aries. Aries would do that.
Aries would. Someone's going to comment and be like, oh my gosh, absolutely. That makes so much sense.
That's funny. My birthday is March 2nd, and I don't know what that makes me. So I also don't want to know. Don't care. Don't look it up.
Great quotes
Don't
by
consult the
me.
demon.
Happiness is not
Oh,
automatic. Happiness is a byproduct of healthy discipline. That's probably a
These
variation
just
of a type
red
of
pill
quote.
quotes. These just manosphere
It's all just Alex
quotes.
Hormozy.
True.
This one's funny.
The
Some
only-
of these I just think are cheesy. Like some are just like
Yeah.
cheesy funny. So great is like cheeky. But it's like talking about gun control. The community of Jesus is the only place that calls people to put down their guns and pick up their crosses. Stop fighting.
That's
Start
crazy.
loving. So
That's
the start loving.
That's
Start.
a Facebook post.
Yeah. That could go crazy. I could put these on shirts and market them to like middle-aged moms.
True. The only list I have in my notes app of quotes is racist things my coworkers say. So
just collecting
it's
dirt
a
in case you ever need
list.
in case you ever need your shift covered.
I don't think they'd care if it came out.
Guys, Derry's a pastor, by the way.
I am.
I'm just kidding.
But
He's
it's a
talking about his
different
other
job.
job with
It's
his
a
other
different job,
coworkers, not
yeah.
his church job.
Yeah. Where am I?
You can't get your footing if you're unwilling to put your foot down. That's a great quote too. That one's really good. That's basically like if you stand for nothing, you fall for anything. Like you can't figure out where you land if you don't make a decision.
True.
Dude, that's awesome. I like that one. I'm gonna start using that.
Give me one more.
When someone's being indifferent or they're like, I just like this person's being really mean to me. I'm like, you need to put your foot down, man. You know, you can't get your foot in if you're unwilling to put your foot down. If you will not overcome this if you keep tolerating it. They're gonna be like, oh,
Nice.
There's other ones about like more community based like Christian stuff. Probably when I was in YWAM. Like I was thinking about some of our friends who left YWAM because they were hurt. But I'm like, you don't leave the community when the burden gets heavy. You lean on the community. Like you can't carry it yourself. Boom. You can use that as a pastor. You got community, so I can let you copyright that one.
I could try. Like my friend Ethan said something to me once.
One time I was overseas and my friend was giving a sermon, and this was in our DTS to be fair. So, you know, a lot of us were new Christians and young Christians. And he said, right before we were talking about something, I said something. And then he's like, oh, that's awesome. That's really encouraging. Thank you very much. And then like he's preaching the sermon in the Philippines. And he goes, my friend Ethan told me this the other day. He's like, you know, like like perfect love cast out all fear. And I just think that's such a great quote or such a great statement. And I was like, bro, that was the Bible. I was like,
that actually wasn't me.
I was like, oh man. I was like,
Technically he's not wrong. You did tell him that.
I did tell him that, but he credited it like I came up with it. And I was like, I did not. I'm sorry.
That's awesome.
Another time overseas,
I'm just gonna start saying like wise words from the Bible and not telling people it's the Bible.
Dude, I did that. I did that when I was working at Costco. I'd be talking to my coworkers, and like an event would happen that reminded me of the Bible, and I'd be like, "Oh man," I was like, "That is so funny." I was like, "I was just reminded of this like Middle Eastern proverb I heard the other day," and I just quote proverbs.
Yeah.
And they're like, "That is so good," and I'm like, "I know, isn't that amazing?" And they're like, their minds are blown. Like, you just got the gospel sucker. That's awesome. One time I was preaching overseas, and what I said was, I'm working through I'm working through a book right now, blah blah blah. And what I meant was I'm reading a book. I think one of the congregation thought I was writing a book because afterwards someone gave me money, and I was like, I can't accept this. Like this is wrong for me. I was like, I was a student, and so I look. Oh, this is in the Philippines actually, because I remember the Irish leader. And I was like, I can't accept this. He's like, well, they gave it to you. I was like, no, like, he's like, give it back. I tried giving it back. They wouldn't take it. So I was like, it's like 50 pesos, which, you know, is a good sacrifice for them. It's like pretty solid. And I was like, oh my gosh. I was like, I don't know what I'm supposed to do with this. Like, I feel bad. So I think I tithed it or something. I forget what I did.
Nice.
But we were laughing about it afterwards because like, oh, I guess I did make it seem like I'm writing a book. Which...
I mean, there's a language barrier too, so
I can write a book full of great quotes by me.
True, and just quote the Bible and don't tell anyone.
Yeah, well, that won't be great quotes by me. Author, God. I'm just like copywriting.
Nice.
You know what's weird? And then we'll end the podcast. We're just rambling now. But like some Bible translations have copyright laws. Isn't that weird? I feel like you should not be allowed to copyright the Bible.
What would be the point of copywriting it?
So you can't, I don't know. Let's see. Like, I think the King James version I've heard claimed is the only one that's not copyrighted.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm sure there's a reason. Anyway.
Yeah. Anyways.
Hope you guys enjoyed
Happy podcast. We're just rambling.
Hope you guys come back next time. We can hear more good quotes by Ethan.
We're actually going to rebrand
from now on.
We're rebranding the podcast. things Ethan says.
Shoots. See you later.
Peace out.
True.